Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Horror Hangouts. I'm Josh, your host, and tonight we have a special episode. I guess we'll call this almost a Horror Writers Roundtable, almost, where I've got three authors with me tonight. Uh, One we have who's returning, who has been on the show before. We have Rozelle. And then joining me for the first time, we have Tamika Thompson. And we have Lydia Prime. How's everyone doing tonight?
Double thumbs up.
Fantastic.
Well, we got a lot to cover. Well, see, Lee, I know you're in Alabama. Tamika, where are you calling from?
San Francisco Bay Area, and it's unusually hot here, so gotta stay cool.
I think it's unusually hot everywhere right now these days.
I hate the heat. I am not about it.
It's funny. I grew up in Indiana where I learned to hate the cold, but now since I've been living in Texas, it's flipped. I now hate the heat and can't wait till it gets cold again.
Exactly.
But
both of those days, right? 2.5 days of that fall, and then boom, it's swampy.
Yeah.
There are times where we have all 4 seasons in one day. It starts off winter, then becomes fall, then the summer, then it goes into the spring.
Yeah.
And then it might snow in the morning and rain at night. I've seen it do that before. So Lydia, where do you hail from?
I'm in New Jersey.
Okay, so we got East Coast, West Coast, Central. So we've got almost all the time zones covered here.
Is Captain Planet going to show up? I don't know. That's just what my goes.
No, but Dennis Hopper is.
I was just thinking about that. It was just a couple weeks ago I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And it's obviously not as great of a movie as the original. But just to watch Dennis Hopper in a chainsaw duel with Leatherface worth the price of admission alone.
Oh yeah.
Chop Top is my favorite, I gotta say.
A little over a year ago, I met Bill Moseley at a horror con, and he was pretty cool.
Yeah, I would love to meet him. He's so cool. Like he just radiates like awesomeness. Like people from my childhood too for me. So
right. Well, and what was cool too is I end up, short little story. I was in Denver, Colorado for this horror con. It was held at like the Grand Hyatt. So I was staying at the same hotel. So later on that night, I said, well, I'm going to go down to the lobby bar, have a few drinks. And before I know it, I see myself that I'm sitting right next to William Forsythe, who was there as well. To his left was Bill Moseley, and to Bill's left was Tyler Main. So I'm basically sitting here just having drinks, talking about playoff hockey because the playoffs were going on with those 3 guys. So it was like so cool. So
feeling like super normal, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't seem. Finally. I mean, I wasn't like starstruck or anything. You know, to me, it was like, all right, I know these guys were all in movies that I have seen 1,000 times, but right now we're just 4 guys sitting at a bar having some beers watching playoff hockey right now. So
that's cool.
For sure.
So obviously we're all into the horror genre. So where did everyone's love of horror begin? So I'll start with you, Tamika.
You know, it began in my childhood. My bedtime stories were horror stories. And my grandmother and my mom, and even my dad would get in on the action sometimes. They would tell us scary stories at night. One of the ones that I used to love was Bloody Bones. To tell us the story of Bloody Bones. And would allow us at a young age to watch horror movies. And I think it was twofold. I think the reason that they did this was they had this like philosophy that you have to kind of laugh to keep from crying. And so it was always like a horror story that had some humor in it. But the other thing I think was that they were really trying to scare us straight in a way. Because I grew up in Detroit in a high crime neighborhood. We're African American people in a country that can be very violent towards African American people, and there was a legacy of violence, in the family that had been done to us in the past, historically, particularly in the South. And so I think there was just this idea that we always have to stay ready. We have to always be prepared for anything, and to understand that violence can show up in a lot of different ways, a lot of different forms, and we have to be thinking about those things. But it was also fun too.
Yeah.
I went from those stories to watching films as soon as they came out, like the typical ones, the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween. And then I was, reading books, the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark series when I was young. I love those.
Yeah.
And I read them to my kids now when they allow me.
Are they equally as
But
creeped
it
out?
started very young for me, probably around 4 or 5 years old. It's always been there.
Yeah, I was about 5 when I watched my first horror movie, and granted, that was Dracula from 1931, but that's kind of like where it started and worked its way up after that. I think my parents was hoping they might scare me straight, but it had the opposite effect, I think. So, Lydia, where did your love of horror begin?
I don't actually know. I think it just was ingrained in me. I've always kind of gravitated towards the darker side of everything, music, clothes, people. It's I don't know, it's just ingrained in my DNA. My dad loved Stephen King. There was a huge thing over one of the beds in my house, and he dipped out when I was 6 or so. So I don't know, I guess maybe in an attempt to kind of get closer, there's some picking up on that, I found a Black Sabbath CD in his dresser. So I think maybe it's some of that weirdness and wanting to know my dad, and I don't know. Also, being female, you're just touched by horror. Around every corner. You're constantly have your keys between your knuckles. Get ready. You don't live don't live on the first floor. It's just something that I've just always been. I don't know.
Well, that's something I think horror does really well, especially with having so many movies have these what are called final girls or whatever, however you want to call them. They can certainly be a good model, I guess, for women to look up to on that end as far as how to handle a bad situation. And hopefully with me for us guys, we can look. That's the type of woman we want to find in a mate. Someone who can handle their shit, and so we don't have to carry the load or whatnot. So,
yeah, preferably with a chainsaw, right? Or nunchucks or something like that.
I don't know. I mean, I'm a fan of the silent murders.
Yeah.
You're in, you're out, nobody knows. So.
Exactly. So, Lee, how about you? Where did it start for you?
I believe it must have happened when I was 5. I think my parents have this big folder with all the things I drew, and kind of even from the beginning, my name with 11 or 12 E's for Lee and that kind of thing. And at 5 years old, there's this folded piece of paper, 8.5 by 11, folded twice to kind of become a book. And it's on the front, it said The Killer Headhunter. And there was a killer headhunter. Superman was in there. Girls kissing him was part of the killer headhunter's problem. And on the back of it, I wrote, "This book is about a great novel." And I was like, all right, I was going to write something about a great novel. I had no idea what it was. My parents had paperbacks everywhere, and a lot of a lot of horror. Peter Straub, there was a copy of The Elementals in my step granny's house that I was really fixated on, and that sort of thing. And then, but around 10 years old, and I will make this short. My dad used to literally ship boxes of socks that he had packed to like Stockton, California, somewhere like that. And he would fill the vehicle up with socks, sell socks all the way to California, turn around, get the mailed socks, put the socks back in, and then sell socks all the way back. Don't ask. I don't know. I don't know what was going on. But I was on those trips, and no air conditioner. We're going through Arizona, New Mexico, and it's hot. And, I was 10 or 11, starting to get a little bored after, a month or two of that. And there was this old book, sort of like a black hamburger, sort of, wrinkled and gray. And I was like, I pulled it off the dash. It was The Dead Zone by Stephen King. And I cracked it open. And I never, I'm still in that desert somewhere as we speak.
That's a good way to get in.
Yeah, it's like once you're in, you never can get out.
No.
So where did everyone start? When did the love of writing start? When did you decide, you know what, I want to start writing books? Where did that start for you, Tamika?
I'd say in grad school, actually. I took a bit of a circuitous path to writing. I went undergrad to Columbia University, and I was studying political science because I thought I wanted to go to law school. And while I was there, I started interning in television production, specifically news and documentaries. And so I eventually shifted and went to grad school at the University of Southern California to study journalism. And the program there was very focused on writing, even though I was in the broadcast program, which is, television and radio. They wanted us to be able to write across all media. So it was, news, but also just like print, online, and TV and radio. And it really was a foundation of just, kind of subject, verb, object. This is how you write to the ear. This is how you write for people who are cooking in the kitchen and listening to the news. And around that time, I started reading Walter Mosley, Devil in the Blue Dress. And his writing is very accessible. And his dialogue sounds like real dialogue. And I think both of those things occurring around the same time made me think, wait a minute, I think I can do this. I think I can do it creatively, But I continued to work as a journalist. And it wasn't until I had my daughter that I could no longer give myself over to this deadline pressure work. I was working in network news for NBC News. And then I eventually left and worked for a television show on PBS. And so I started taking creative writing classes as a way to pull away from this deadline pressure work that I was doing, and fell in love with it. And then thought I was going to be this literary writer. Everything I was writing was dark, and everyone was like, "Whoa, did you write this? This is really." And so I just kind of went with it. It was like everything was coming together. The horror that I had picked up in my youth. The journalism. I mean, news is horror. When you turn on the evening news, or you read through, the newspaper on your phone, there's a lot of horror in it. And so that research and that eye to storytelling, and really trying to be accessible and connect with a lot of people, it all just kind of came together. Not to say that it was easy, because it wasn't. But I felt like I had finally figured out, something had clicked into place, and I figured out what I was supposed to be doing.
That's such a good feeling.
I never let up. I've still been plugging away every day.
Would you say too that, I think this might be true for most of us that are fans of the horror genre, whether we're just fans or we're writers or we just like watching the movies, embracing horror fiction is our way of maybe dealing with in a healthy manner the real horrors of life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting. I was at StokerCon at the end of May, and I moderated a panel, and I'd love to tell you guys about it later too. But I was meeting a lot of people. That was my second year going. I was meeting a lot of people for the first time, and everyone had a reaction, I think, when they were meeting me, because I have a very bright, bubbly kind of personality. But then when you read the work is not bright and bubbly at all. And I remember talking to a few of them and saying, I really think it's because we get all of that onto the page. We process trauma. We process the trauma that we're witnessing, in some cases that we've experienced. I know one of the things that you mentioned was being female, being touched by horror all the time, and sort of the warnings that you get. And so the panel that I moderated actually was about feminist horror. And one of the things that they talked about was the final girl. And I thought it was so interesting because the panelists, who were, women or femme, were saying that they really want that final girl trope to come to an end, or not be so pervasively used, because it is a perpetuation of female violence against female bodies. And I thought, I was so blown away, because I came to the panel as the moderator thinking that the same as you said, like the final girl was going to be, we're going to rally behind her. This is who we are supposed to look up to. We all want to get out there and kick some butt. And I think we all agree with it. But what do we do if we keep putting that out there, right? What do we do?
Yeah.
It becomes the same story over and over,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the final girl is a little bit better than what I call in the 40s and 50s and even the 60s, the screamer. Like, so the woman must, when the monster comes, the woman screams. And the screamer is a call for some male to bring rationality and order and real power to the narrative and pull us back away from this feminine whatever. And so it's like, that is, to me, the worst. I loved it in the book of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where the main protagonist, the woman, says, okay, I'm going to act like I'm going to scream and fall over, and then I'm going to jump him. Right. I thought that was really, really cool. So we're not there yet. I'm working right now on a little scholarly piece on the 2007 movie Teeth, and sort of a hydric humanoid monster / heroine, and just nothing quite works yet, but I think that overtures like that are promising.
Yeah. I would say that trend that you were talking about, Lee, earlier, with how women were portrayed in horror, I think it started shifting a little bit in the 60s with Barbara Steele in a lot of those Italian horror films that she was in, because her presence was certainly a much stronger presence, to where it was almost in parallel with whoever the male lead was. And of course, oftentimes she was also the villain, or would play dual roles, being the villain and the heroine, so to speak. But that's an interesting thing about it.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that was interesting, though, what you were bringing up, though, at that panel you were at, because I myself, from my perspective, don't necessarily always see it that way. So I do think it does get a little overused. And nowadays it's almost forced in movies, where, back in the 70s, 80s, or so forth, it was an earned thing. They earned the right to kind of finish out the movie, be there at the end. And now it seems like they're just kind of shoved in there just because, well, we have to have someone survive, so it's going to be this person type of thing, I think.
I think there might be, I don't know, I haven't drawn any conclusions about this either. But I wonder if there's more opportunity in books, more space to have more nuance around the final girl. I think about The Shining, the book versus the film. And how much stronger the character Wendy is in the book than she is in the film. And I have a whole thing around The Shining. I won't even get into it about but I wonder if some of the criticism might be about final girls in film as opposed to in
I think maybe because I feel like I mean, I read a lot of I would say female written fiction just because like I work with a women's and all women's press and stuff like that. But when I see like the woman at the end of the story, it's not usually like I guess I made it, like it's for a reason. There's vengeance there, there's revenge. But again, that comes back to like what you were saying before about like it being about the rage and the trope. But I'm kind of about that female rage because I feel like we're too bottled up anyways.
Right.
Josh was talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I don't know if you were talking about that before the episode started or after, but the very end of that one struck me in that period as a sign of strong, brutal, powerful woman at sort of the apex and sort of finding this inner monster and it being a wonderful thing. I don't know.
Well, I could say this much, though, and we'll continue on afterwards, but when I was about a teenager, I was about 13 or 14, okay, in the 80s or so, late 80s, and I grew up where I only saw my mom 8 weeks out of the year, okay, because parents were divorced, lived in separate ends of the country. I didn't really get to grow up with my sister, so I kind of lacked, I guess, that female type of influence. I think we both need those positive influences for both males and females. So I didn't really have that as much growing up as I probably wish I had. So I kind of turned to certain characters in movies and horror movies of all places as that. I'm looking at Dee Wallace from The Howling as a mother figure. I'm looking at, well, who better? I mean, she was not going to let that dog near her kids. So that type of thing. Or I'm looking at maybe Jamie Lloyd from Halloween 4 as a sister figure. Or I'm looking at Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street or Kirsty from Hellraiser as a potential love interest or whatever. But you get what I'm saying there. Sometimes from my perspective, those type of characters were actually helpful for me in growing up, I think.
I think a great sort of woman Hannibal Lecter slasher type villain to take the helm and like have 5 parts. When that happens, we know that as feminists we've made it to another level, because like when she when we start to a woman would never think of that, she'd never do that. It's like, okay, let me introduce you to my family. I mean, we get a great woman slasher film that makes it to part 7. I'm like, this is gonna be awesome.
Yeah, they had their opportunity to. Well, I think of Julia from Hellraisers 1 and 2 because she was really the main villain of those first 2 movies. And then I also think of one that doesn't get talked enough about is a small little independent film called Siren, which was really kind of built off the first segment of the original VHS about this. Oh, now I can't think of what the creature's a succubus, I think. And
Siren. All right,
yeah, Siren. I would check it out
tomorrow. That sounds right up my scholarly alley right now. I got to see that.
But the character's actually named Lilith or Lily, one of the two. Originated in one of the early segments of the movie VHS. And they end up making a whole movie off of it. And I'm thinking to myself, the movie's pretty good. And I'm thinking, and she's more of an anti-hero, this character, but I'm thinking there was a golden opportunity they could have made a franchise out of that. I mean, if you can make a franchise out of subspecies, you could have made this franchise, which is a small, cheap independent
Mhm.
film that's made however many sequels. They could have done the same thing with Siren easily.
Sure.
So, now where was I? Okay. So, Lydia, where did it all start for you as far as writing goes?
I kind of always was like noticed for writing well in like elementary school even and into middle school, high school, going on and things like that. I don't know if it's just that I communicate better with written
Mhm.
word.
Mhm.
Like my brain has enough chance to really like think out the word and really get out what I mean to say. Um, I guess probably there, but I mean, in like 2016 or 17, I think, Nina D'Arcangela kind of like brought me under her wing and brought me into the horror community, doing like the Ladies of Horror picture prompt contest every month, and like, working with Sirens Calls, wow, Sirens Call publications. So I guess there, really,
Mhm.
Okay.
Cool.
And Lee, how did it start for you?
Well, I think as a child, I came to realize pretty quickly that saying provocative or silly things was my way into keeping people's attention, or to stretch it. And I come from a kind of a family where a creepier story, like all the exaggerations, the families like telling stories about for example, a cousin, Terry and Jerry, and it's an old Packard comes up in the 30s, and we're like in peanut country. Not we, I was negative 200 at that point, and we go in, and Jerry and Terry are standing there as the man in the Packard comes out, and he has a cigar, and he's puffs that cigar. He goes into my great grandmother and grandfather's house, drops the cigar. Jerry looks at Terry with that sort of look in his eye, right? Like Tamika was making, like that, and like this, and gets the cigar, goes around to the smokehouse. There's a mother hog suckling the baby pigs, and like Jerry looked
Oh,
like at Terry, took the cigar, puffed it, and then got down there and sucked that pig's teat. And what logic, I mean, and so that's where,
okay.
and so I mean, you tell the kids at school that, and you're
Why?
Oh my God. I knew you guys did some crazy stuff in Alabama, but I didn't know it was that crazy.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
Whew.
And so
Whew.
I established an immediate rapport with language, and did okay. Like I tried to paint and do other creative stuff, and it's just like words was obvious. That was my axe. That's what I had. It's what I could do, and so I used it. I was like, I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to be a professor. I'm going to be a writer, and it's just been that sort of journey. So
Awesome. So, Lydia, why don't you tell us about one of your most recent books that you've released?
Yeah, okay. So We're Not Ourselves Today is a collection of horror stories by myself and Jill Girardi. We actually wrote those stories over a couple of years, not intending to ever mix them and make them into this like collection that we have. But they just really mesh together really well. I don't know. It's almost like we share a brain sometimes. But our intention was to create this like library of like authors that are collected by this librarian,
Mm-hmm.
librarian. So that's what the green skinned pictures and promo is all about. Uh, trying to think of just something to tell you guys. Like, I mean, there's a lot of lessons to be learned in reading, We're Not Ourselves Today. I personally don't believe in happy endings. So, a lot of times the bad guy wins when it comes to reading my kind of fiction. But there's a frog invasion in Kuala Lumpur. There's like a crazy rehab place that's doing some crazy things, and I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm really bad at this. But
No, you're not,
there's some
Lydia.
fun stuff.
It's a great book.
Thank you.
Its production is spectacular. The artwork is phenomenal, inside and out. And I was just couldn't stop reading.
Different artist.
Yeah.
The inside was a different artist. The inside was Deddy Baddick. And he was very, very great too. He was good to work with. He was quick. And I think Jill mostly worked with him. I don't think I've reached out personally, but yeah. Great artist, top notch. And thank you so much for saying that about our writing. Like, seriously, it's huge. It's huge to hear that from anybody. Like,
I've got more books to add to my reading list, it sounds like. So it's more or less a collection of short stories, is that?
Yeah, there are 13. We say there's 13 pulp horror stories in there. Me and Jill are fans of monster stories, so you're gonna get monsters and just horrible goriness, mostly from me. Jill's more like poetic, kind of gothic kind of feel, I think. And then you got me, who's just like everything is oozing and it's gross and it's terrible, but without crossing certain lines, it's just
Was that collaboration kind of a thing where you wrote so many stories and then Jill wrote so many stories and you just kind of put them together, or was there like okay?
She approached me like, I want to say late last summer, and was like, "Do you want to do this with me? We have enough stories, because I think there's like 11 reprints in it and 2 all new stories. So, they were out in the world doing their own thing, and then we just mashed them together, and it just comes together so well. You would think we planned it.
Excellent. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I haven't really done a whole lot of co-collaborations yet. I have wrote a short story that's supposed to be going into an anthology later this year, so see how that goes.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll wait and see how that works out. But I was surprised they even asked me, like, really, you want me to? Okay. See what I can come up with. So, Tamika, tell us about some of your recent works.
So the most recent is Unshod, Cackling, and Naked. It's a collection of my work that was, I'd say, probably about a decade in the making, because it's 13 tales and 9 of them had been out, just like Lydia's, had kind of been out in the world, either in an anthology or journal magazine. And then, so that was 9. So then the 4 were new to the collection. And I had no intention when I was working on all of these to pull them together in a collection, but an editor that I knew was kind of asking around. They were starting up a new press and wanted collections and novels, and so I kind of looked at my body of work and tried to figure out what were there some themes there, and lo and behold, there were things that kept kind of showing up and everything. There was a lot of feminist horror, but there was also transgressive horror within the stories, where the oppressed are rising up in breaking out of labels and chains and expectations of what their role is supposed to be in society. And in some cases, it's women. In some cases, it was, creatures. The opening to the collection is a story called The Turn, where, you have your family pet, your dog. So it kind of asks the question, what happens if the dog decides it no longer wants to be a pet or no longer wants to have a so-called owner. And so it's just sort of my vision, canine uprising. But I put it together and I got it out there. It ended up not actually being with that editor and that press. It ended up being with Unnerving Books. And Eddie Generous is the one who did the cover, and he's also the publisher. And we got some great reviews from Publishers Weekly, from Booklist, and it recently won an Indie Book Award, which I was really excited about. The next Book Award. So I traveled down to San Diego for that. It was like I went to StokerCon and came back to the Bay Area and then went right back down, weeks for the ceremony. So that was nice. So I'm glad I pulled them together and really took some time to think about it. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. What I really loved about that collection, and I thought, is that you do touch on provocative issues, but it is so deftly done that I never stop having fun, and that is so hard to do. That is so hard to accomplish.
Well, you do it in your collection. Sure.
Well, thank you. But yeah, I love that. There were some sort of aquatic monsters in your book too. I love that story.
Yes. I'm hoping to do more of that in the future. But we'll see.
Oh, come submit to Candicia. There's an open call right now for female authors, or I'd invite you guys too. But it's pretend you don't see her.
All right, I'll be in touch about that.
Come on through.
So, Lee, what about your most recent book?
Backwaters, 12 Murky Tales. I've been working really hard all summer to try to promote the book and learning a lot about how to get your stuff out there, whether it be walking into a local bookstore or a regional bookstore and kind of with a couple of copies, or book bubbing, or any of these varieties of, some things work, some things don't. But basically my work is just it's got Southern Gothic roots that sort of starts to become science fiction, I think. And what I try to do is just take it to a point where it's just almost unbearable what the line is going to give you. Like, what would be the worst word here to use in this situation? Just like, what would be the wrongest kind of thing that resonates, and try to craft it and that sort of thing. And I've learned that I much prefer rewriting to trying to pull ideas out of my head, like polishing. Maybe I do too much of that, maybe I do too much and just like make it a little bit too sort of quirky. But that's the fun part for me now, is like being able to play with these characters and that sort of thing. So it's called Backwaters.
Can I just say, I had the pleasure of writing a blurb for Backwaters.
Generous blurb, kind.
I just want to read the final line of it. I said, a powerful, arresting collection of connected stories with haunting images that will stay with you. Ooh. And I really love the connection between the stories. I mean, they're different, but when you get to the end of it, you feel like you really moved through a real arc, which I think is hard to do in a collection. But yeah, I think everybody should go out and.
Thank you. I had no idea I was making that kind of collection when the first few stories sort of came out. And then I went back and retrofitted a couple of things to make them kind of fit too. But, I tried to stay like with David Lynch, like in the idea, which is like not a conceptual idea, an abstraction, but a time, place, a real feeling, emotional feeling, and characters and stuff. and then make the connections later. That's very kind of you, Tamika, and I appreciate it. That's why I have a Tamika portrait of my metal piece down, and I make my family burn little candles in front of it every morning.
Saint Tamika.
We stand, unshod and naked before it, and in your honor. Sorry, Lydia.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you. That was very important for me. It was a very big moment to get that kind of encouragement, and I appreciate it.
I definitely got to check it out. It sounds really awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was going to say too, we talked briefly there while writing how there might be some sort of, I guess, commentary or social commentary in our writing, which seems to happen a lot in horror. I think horror oftentimes becomes almost, I'm trying to think what the word I want to say, almost a critique on what's going on in the world. Whenever you guys write, because I've found this too, I'll be writing without even intending on having any type of commentary in it, and it just kind of naturally comes out of the characters. Next thing I know, I'm like, oh, this whole chapter is about being anti-war all of a sudden, because I'm dealing with these two characters that are both sort of suffering from PTSD from the Civil War, and I'm like, oh wow, I just did that. With the two ladies and with the gentleman here, do you intentionally set out to put some commentary in, or does it sometimes just naturally come out of your characters?
I think it naturally comes out of my characters. Generally, I write a lot of addiction stories too. So in kind of gravitating towards that world, there's just kind of a lot of commentary to be made between what do they say, rehabs, institutions, and jails, like all that stuff. So there's no way to avoid it for me. And like we were saying before about like it kind of being the way to get through trauma, like writing. I think that's like a big part of it too for me. It's like a release. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just natural.
Yeah.
So, what about you guys?
For me, it really depends on the story and where the story originates. Some stories begin in a place, and so if the story begins in a certain place, like my longer work, not this collection, but something that I'm working on for the future, is set in a place where the people are living in an impoverished neighborhood, and they are in a high crime neighborhood where gun violence is prevalent. And this is an extension, the setting is an extension of where I grew up, but also when I was working as a journalist, I did a couple of years of research on youth violence in America, about 2 years worth of research. It was in preparation for a documentary that never actually happened, but it's all been folded into this longer work. And some other stories come with a character. I envision the character first. And so as I'm understanding the timeline of that character's life, depending on, who or what they are, or who or where they've been or what they do, those sorts of things will come out on their own. It's less of I've researched it and that research is coming into the story. It's more of I'm discovering it as I go. Kind of to your point, where you're just kind of like, oh, wait, this story is about, the beauty industry and how, and that comes up in a couple of my stories, but how the beauty industry is sort of attacks women just with all of the information that we're fed about what we're supposed to look like and who we're supposed to be and what is the correct way to have a body in this world? What is what is the value of your physical body? And what is your body not allowed to do? Your body's not allowed to age. It's you're not allowed to have teeth that are not perfectly white. Your skin cannot have hair on it in certain places. That's for men and women, right? Men, I think about my husband like shaving every day. It's like, let that hair be free.
It gets too itchy. I have to shave. And I haven't owned a comb or brush in 30 years, so low maintenance.
So I think it's where that sort of seed or that nugget comes from, and some things I write are just fun. Some of them are not making a statement at all. There may be like a little passing thing that's in there, but really, like the final story in my collection, Abduction Near Knife Lake, it has a very brief motivation for the character. The character discovers an Amber Alert, but she discovers that the girl in the Amber Alert is black, and she's black. And she's concerned that if she doesn't take matters into her own hands, because she thinks that she's discovered the girl, that if she doesn't take matters into her own hands, people won't search for her that way that they would if she were blonde and had white skin. And so it's a very brief moment, but the rest of the story is just a fun story. There's a high-speed chase in it. There's glass flying, and there are gunshots, and she discovers that the girl that she is trying to save may not be who or what she originally thought. And so so that story might be about something, or it may not be, it's a social commentary, but maybe not, So yeah, it depends for me.
Yeah, sometimes it's best just to let the readers decide for themselves. I think sometimes instead of just spelling it out for them.
Yeah, definitely.
I stopped describing main characters. I haven't described a main character, I think, in like 2 or 3 years, because I wanted my readers to start like seeing the characters however they wanted to. It kind of is working, because nobody's even noticed it really, except to be like, I don't even know what to suggest for you because you didn't say. I don't know.
I think it was interesting for me because I have a story within my collection where I don't describe the character, and I don't actually really name the character until the very end. But even that is hidden. But everyone assumes that the main character is a woman, which I find interesting because that's never actually stated anywhere in the story. So sometimes you just kind of let the reader go, and they'll find themselves within the character. So I think that there are probably some men reading it who thinks the main character is a man, and some women.
That's
sure.
Sure. That's great.
With that character, how did you picture him in your head? Was it indeed a female, or was it male, or
the character is gender non-conforming?
Okay. So,
and doesn't presents in different ways on different days.
Interesting.
Cool.
But I think because the character is telling the story and has a boyfriend,
it's assumed
that everyone assumed that it was, and I'm a woman, I'm the author, and so I think that they made that assumption.
Yeah, especially if that's being told in the first person, I suppose. Then they're going to say, well, it's the author's female, has a boyfriend, so they're automatically going to assume that.
And I don't begrudge that at all.
Right.
I don't begrudge that at all. I think I probably do that sometimes too.
I definitely do. I know it.
Well, I think it's just instinctual, probably.
Just because you're going on the journey with someone, just so you're making them up in your brain, so now they're going with you.
Right.
Cool.
Speaking of that, I mean, is there any specific way, because this kind of leads into another question, when you looked at your, as you start your story and you're figuring out who your characters are, is there a specific process that any of you go through in developing your characters? Do you like write down, well, who is this character, or you just kind of like maybe base them on someone you know, or how's that process, or you just let them go and whichever direction they go, that's the direction they go?
Have you guys ever seen that or read that article by Tina Jens, I think, Such Awful People or something like that? I can't really remember all the details, but she lays out this plan where it's like, what does your character, what's their favorite food? List all of these attributes of their character so that when you get there, you do that. So like I'm working today, here's two characters that are together in this story, and like one of them has to remind himself to bathe, and this one smells like leather. This one sits with knees up in a chair. This one leans back, expansive cigar. Both of them like the same cigar, curls into a ball, and this one has a specialized weapon. So it's like I am prepared and try my best to know that character. I mean, and it relates to the idea that your question that you had before about socio-political message. I don't have the ability to start with the idea of a socio-political parable and make a story. I do not have that capacity. It would stink so bad. And I've tried to like environmental manifesto as art, or something like that. And that's a lot of that really, really stinks. I mean, I want to write a story or even something bigger with the main protagonist being like a right-wing talk show radio personality, the most venomous, vile monster that you can think of. But I know I can't write that if I don't love this character and somehow figure out how to humanize the situation. And so I'm scared to touch this character. I think this would be a perfect character for a book. This person who's like on the radio, but then has a life, and he says these things or these horrible things, and then things really happen to him. I mean, I see all kind of ideas, but I'm afraid to touch it because it's too raw. Because when I'm in the car, if I happen to turn the radio on, I hear one of these people saying these things, I just melt down in rage, and I can't create art that way. Does that make any sense at all? Yeah. I mean, I can't do it.
Makes sense to me.
Definitely makes sense.
I will say that I cannot do those lists. It was something for character building. When I was learning to write creatively, I did the certificate program at the UCLA Extension Writers Program. And this kept coming up where they would give us these character lists, and we would actually have to turn those in before we started working on whatever story. And everyone was able to do that. But it wasn't until I created my own writing practice where I was sitting down writing every day that I discovered that my method is actually a timeline for the character from the time the character is born, but like in scene. So the important points in that character's life, I kind of write those out in scene, so I can see the people, the important people around that character, and see that character kind of move and react and speak. And I work a lot of that out before I even start writing the story, because I have to understand them, and none of that makes it in, obviously, unless it's a memory. I'm basically writing backstory. I'm writing their backstory. It's not exhaustive. Like I'm not doing
George R.R. Martin level.
Pivotal, like the turning point moments in that character's life. A little bit of the mundane things, just kind of, where they went to school, like those things. But I have to do a lot of it in scene. When I was younger, I used to work as a commercial actress and a model, and my mother put me in beauty pageants and just all of these things. And I think because of that performance background, so much of building those characters was about physically embodying them. And I can't really obviously do that when I'm writing, because I'm not the character.
Yeah.
I think that process that I figured out for myself is the only way I can do it. I cannot write those. Like, what is the theme today? Or no, and it's a flaw. I feel like it's a flaw in me because everyone else that I knew, they were able to do it, and I would get to they'd be like, "Where are your characters?" I'd be like, "I don't have them."
You do it right here. See, I have to have it on 100 pieces of paper. You get to know them without having to do all that.
It's a lot of work, though, because I'm writing all of these scenes that I'm never going to use, but I have to do it, and and it's for the main, like the protagonist and the antagonist. It's really like the main character.
So, but there's so much authenticity kind of folded into the narrative, even if those scenes or those passages are never used. You know that this is a real kind of person. You kind of know why they're saying this because of what happened, and it doesn't matter. It's like it doesn't matter if we know the writer knows and it's authentic, then we believe it and we are like totally all in. But if it smells phony, then we can feel that too, and you have to do all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
I don't really do any of that.
I mean, I was gonna say if I did all that, write all the characters and all that stuff, I would be thinking to myself, wait a second, I could have had 2 chapters written by now. I know who these people are. It's in my head. I know how those characters are gonna start. I know where they're gonna end. How they get to the end, we'll find out.
Let me tell you. Okay, so Lee, you read "We're Not Ourselves Today," yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so Hazel Hill.
Yeah.
That started as like a backwards Little Mermaid. That is how I got the idea for that story. It was a backwards Little Mermaid. What the story actually is like the rehab people are like taking the people to get high from the people. Sorry guys, spoilers. But yeah, that's part of it. That's like a thing. So, but that started as a backwards Little Mermaid. It was a fish person who wanted to stay like a fish but couldn't. Yeah. Anyways, I don't know where these ideas come from or why they happen, but they do, and then they turn into stories. Sometimes they come to me like 4-line poems. And there's nothing I can do about it. It just starts as a poem and then I flesh it out. So
it's working.
Thank you.
It's working.
Oh geez, probably why I don't have like an actual book out, just short stories.
Well, I was gonna ask that because it seems like all of you have been writing like series of short stories. In my case, I've done basically one novella, another one coming out soon, and then I've just wrote a short story. You think it's more difficult to do a series of short stories versus one novel, or one story with the same through line throughout it?
For me, I've never successfully written anything over 8,000 words. So I really don't know. But to be fair, I started my journey on picture prompts. So I've only really navigated away from that world and like needing to like commit to like 350 or less words, and being able to tell a full story in those like 350 or less words. It's very, very difficult to then branch out into thousands.
I co-edited an anthology. That was the first book that I have published with a small press. And then I did a novella called Salamander Justice, which was horror.
Okay.
Collection. But I'm also working on a novel and a novella. And I'll have some news to share on that soon. But I honestly, I took a class with Tana Nareeb Dew. She just won the Stoker for the reformatory. And the advice that she gave us was to start with short stories. And I had by that time only really been writing short stories. And so, but I felt there was a part of me that felt like I wasn't really committed because I was doing short stories, that I needed to have something bigger, something, longer. The reality is, for me at least, that short stories are harder to write, but they are so satisfying.
Yeah.
Just because when you're revising them and you change something, you can smooth that or layer that into the story more easily than you can when you're writing a novel or a novella. You write, you got like a 98,000 word novel and you change something up top, you've broken the whole thing.
Yeah.
You got to go back and fix that.
It's like Jenga.
That's why so many people, when they work on longer things, they really just feel like they're banging their head against the wall the whole time. And outlines work for that. I do outline some of my short stories as well, but there's just something very satisfying about being able to get in and get out with a short story, and be able to read it in one sitting. It's as satisfying as a film versus an episodic television show that goes on for 7 seasons, and you come in season 1 and then you're like, oh, this is great, and then you realize that there are 6 more seasons. It's like, oh my god. That for me, that's I think I enjoy novellas. I enjoy working on this novel. But there's something very satisfying about the short story. I think it's probably my first love.
And the short story has to be rich. It has to be efficient, and it has to, everything kind of has to reflect back to this plot that's moving right now, and also the main character. So I can't, like, it's easier to know what to cut, because know that, whereas in a novel, you're like, I started telling, when I wrote my novel, I spent most of it in flashbacks where they were having traumatic memories, and people are like, just tell the story. And I've been curling, but in a short story, the vehicle doesn't give me the opportunity to mess it up like that. And I just, you can experiment, you can do all this interesting, fun stuff, but it all has to serve a tighter, richer vehicle, right? So that's what I like about writing short stories.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of found, like, with this short story, it's interesting because the book I'm just finishing up started off being a short story that I entered into a contest, and I liked it so much. I'm thinking, I think there's I could do something with this. I could make an actual full story out of it. And then, like you were talking about with writing an actual short story too, it is a little bit easier to edit, because with this recent book, I had to take notes and I had to stop it. Wait a second. How old is this guy again? I think I said he was born in 1600. So I better get my math right. Just little things like that. I had to go back to the second tale to see what it is I said about that person, where with a short story, it's much easier to go back, and if you need to make a little fix, it's not going to destroy everything. Let's see here. So what's the most rewarding thing about writing, and what's the most challenging thing about writing? Tamika, if you want to start.
Rewarding, I think, is connecting with people and realizing that they got what you were trying to do. That part still amazes me, because so much of it is just in our head, and we're just by ourselves, and we're, it's just me and my computer. And I'm spending hours working on something and trying to convey something, emotion, information and experience. But even though the characters are not me, it's some aspect of myself that goes into this. And so when you hand that off into the world, and an editor first connects with it because they publish it, but that readers actually get it, and that it maybe makes someone think twice about something, or maybe see something in a way that they hadn't thought of it before. That to me is just, that's the whole reason you do it, right?
Right.
People, and to have them have empathy for your characters. And I do see it in my children too, as they are discovering books and they are falling in love with books. The empathy that they have for the the characters in the book. That's really so much of the value of reading in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was the other part? The bad parts or the
not so much bad, challenging, maybe frustrating.
I think the challenges are really societal challenges that I've experienced. They are the challenges that women face and that people of color face, of having to have certain kinds of stories in order to get the early publication. And so what I'm talking about is something that I learned very early on, which is the white gaze, is that very often writers of color feel that they need to write to the white gaze in order to get published. I've been able to, as I've grown in the craft, to work around that so that I am not telling stories that are for that. But that, I think, for me was the challenge in the beginning. It was hard to get things published in the U.S. that had African-American characters who were dealing with some sort of speculative issue, but that it wasn't centered in race-based trauma. So I found that it was easier for me to connect with editors who were in the UK or Canada than it was in the US. And so some of that early stuff, I think, was for the speculative stories, I was able to connect. Those were the challenges, was trying to get published here with stories that were not about slavery, Jim Crow, civil rights, inner city violence. Although I do come back to inner city violence in some of the work, it's not for the white gaze. It's really about these characters. And so that I'd say probably has been the challenge. I wouldn't say I've fully overcome it. I don't know if I ever will, but I've gotten around it in a lot of ways. And just, being really persistent. Like, I really feel like my job is to persevere for the stories, for the characters, making sure that my characters' voices are getting out there to connect with readers, and just not really giving up or giving in. So that's been the challenge, I say.
Okay. What about you, Lydia? What kind of, I guess, what's the most rewarding part? What's the most challenging part of writing for you?
The most rewarding part is probably just realizing people understand what I'm saying, or like that they're feeling what I'm feeling when I'm writing those things, It's like, it's cathartic, so I guess that's probably my like reward from writing, if I had to like really pick one. Struggle wise though, I have been very fortunate just in the sense of like falling into situations. I worked at a comedy club. That's where I met Nina, and then just kind of like have been in the community since like 2017, I think. But I mean, I guess challenges, if I had to pick something, has got to be like the flooding of like social media and stuff, and needing to be like a social media person to like market and have this and have that, and it's really, really exhausting for somebody who has the like brain power of Pooh Bear. Like, it's just not. My day job is finance, so like it's
Same
not
here. Same here.
the energy level at the end of the day, it's just not there. So like, if it's not there for me to write, it's definitely not there for me to throw on a green face paint and make a video being like, read my story. So
well, that would work a lot better for you doing it than me, trust me.
I did do it though.
I guess I could try it. What's the worst that could happen?
I saw some of your 1970s performance art pieces that on YouTube that I thought were very provocative. I mean, some of your sort of dancing moves and that sort of thing. I mean, so
what is this? How do I see these?
Oh, maybe it was somebody else. I thought
That wasn't me. I guarantee you.
Weren't you a performance artist and did sort of okay? All right. Well, maybe it's somebody else.
If it is, it's an evil or maybe not so evil twin. I don't know. It's
the eviler twin.
Trust me, that is nothing. No one's going to want to pay money.
You in a really like VHS quality video with a unitard, and a mullet.
Oh, he's just pulling your leg.
Yeah, now you're full of it. Now.
He's pulling your leg.
Probably just remembers filming it.
Yeah, exactly. I guess for my answer, what's the best thing is like entering a strange and possibly dangerous world with all of these interesting characters. And when I get in there and it feels good and I'm just polishing, that's the fun part. The challenging part is, I have a daughter and I realized very quickly that this crushing fear for the child's safety was going to be there for every second of my life until I'm gone. That there's going to be some part of me that's never free of that. And I think I feel not anywhere close to that, but similar to that to the books that I, produce and put the cover on and try really hard. And then you take it out, it goes out to, these reviewers and that kind of thing. It's not me. It's this little thing that I love so much. And I don't want to see it hurt or misunderstood or bullied or anything. And I wanted to do well and that sort of thing. And so there's a little bit of a protectiveness. It's almost like I don't even want anybody to read it. I'm going to keep you here safe at home in this sort of challenge-free world, but you can't do that. You got to let them go.
You do have to have a little bit of I forget what's the that.
Try.
Yeah.
Some reviewer recently left a review just being very angry about the work. Just there was a review about our content warning or something, yelling at us for apologizing. But the content warning literally just said, if this isn't your cup of tea, walk away.
Yeah.
I'm doing this voluntarily. I'm putting something similar to that to my next book. Just to let people know that this might not be something you want to be reading if you are offended by, or, if you find this disturbing type of thing. That, and it's also might be a good marketing thing because oftentimes when people see those, it makes them want to buy it. So
exactly.
I did learn something in my 8 years in college or whatever.
Nude rituals. Sorry, guys. Sorry, everybody. There's all kind of nude satanic rituals. So you can read it, that sort of thing. Every 14-year-old is going to be grabbing it.
Technically vampire rituals, but you're close enough. So, are there any questions that the three of you want to ask each other as we're closing out this evening?
Thank you for that question. That's a great question because I do have a question, and for everybody, I know that your Josh, your novella, which is sort of a horror western, right, has been out for sale and out and being reviewed and stuff for a while. So everybody here has a recent project. And so what have you guys found is the number one best way to get your work out there for other people to see it? What's the trick? What's the technique? I find things like I said earlier. I found things that kind of work. I see things that that I spend a lot of time and it doesn't work. What do you guys have the magic other than just writing better books than mine? I mean, what do you guys do to make it?
You're talking about marketing?
Yeah.
I think the thing that I would say is that you have to give yourself time to market. what I think happens a lot of times is that authors get their contract from the publisher and they get their date from the publisher of when they want to publish the book, and it's very close to where they are. It'll be like a month or 2 months or maybe even 3 months down the road.
Mm-hmm.
I pushed mine way out. And, I think Eddie wasn't really interested in doing anything, quickly either. Just to give myself time for those long lead reviews. So I sent my book to Publishers Weekly, to Book List, some of the other like long lead places. They took they needed like 4 or 6 months in advance.
Yeah.
And so just having that time to really put together and execute a marketing plan, I think is the key. It going from, you wrote the book, you sent the book out, you get the contract, and then the book is going to go out like in 2 or 3 months is a bit of a rush for you to be able to get the reviews that you need. And not even the long lead reviews, but to be able to connect with reviewers within the genre. So the horror reviewers who, need some time because they have a schedule and they have so many books that are coming out and they can only read so many. So if you send it to them early enough, and they got my advanced copy early enough to be able to actually read it and do a nice review for it. And not everything is going to be, positive. Not everything is going to be, because I know there's some debate about every review on Amazon has to be 5 stars. I don't agree with that. But, when you do get good blurbs, that's another part of having that long lead, be able to get those blurbs. When you have a good blurb, you blast it out to the world. You get a good review, you blast it out to the world. Social media comes back. Social media.
There's a mackerel tabby in our midst, I see.
Yeah, you were just talking about pets rising up. I think this cat is about ready to. Hold on 1 second, you guys.
But yeah, I think time to be able to do each aspect of it that you want. Give yourself time.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I don't know yet on that one. On that question, being an indie author where I don't really have a publishing company to back me up, I mean, the hardest thing has been getting the word out. And one thing I learned is you can post 1,000 times on every single media outlet you can find. And I don't have time to be on all of them. I'm only on 3, but there's 1,000 other people doing the exact same thing. So what I've heard is you have to find a way to differentiate yourself from other people. And I don't know how to do that. To be honest, I don't know. But also to form relationships with your people that are following you on social media. Try to just strike up a conversation. It doesn't have to be anything about your book, but I have found that in time, as you talk up and they say something, oh, you're an author, aren't you? Oh, yeah, here's my book link if you'd like to check it out. Or that's about the best I can come up with from a marketing part anyway.
In the real world too, like getting out to events and selling books and, hand selling books and connecting with people, doing readings. I think the readers who have read my work and have really connected with them, I've stayed in contact with them. And we talk about other books. And if I read something and I know I'm going to post it to my newsletter or my blog, I might send them a direct message and say, have you read this? Like, I really love this. Like, and that's not because I'm trying to sell books. That's because I want to have a relationship with the people who are reading my book. And I do value their opinion. And like I have one person who I DM with about other projects, and I have some projects that are coming out, in the future. And there's a part of me that's like, I wonder if she's going to like these.
That's cool.
I love the other work, but I really want her to love the new stuff too. And I do value her in other readers' opinions because they're all so well read.
Yeah.
If you love my work, then I just, I feel so honored.
That may help a lot with the sort of curating your ideas and everything. You kind of have an idea of a more specific sort of audience range, it might be a really wonderful thing to have that connection, you know, even if only one person just like worships it.
You know, and that's the thing is that, you know, I know there's a lot of focus for indie authors to have a lot of reviews, and I think that that's fantastic to show that you can sell a lot of books and connect with a lot of readers. But if I have, you know, a dozen or 2 dozen really happy reviews like that are just like, this book, this is exactly like the kind of book I love to read, and I connect with it, that makes me really happy. That matters to me. So.
Okay. What about you, Lydia?
I feel like being grateful, being personal, you know, in messages, not just messages, but posts and things, being like a real human is much more helpful than them, like anybody, the audience, if you will, them to just see like the same slate over and over and over and over. Like everybody gets bored eventually, and eventually like it becomes annoying, you know, because we are all authors, and most of our like friends are other authors. Eventually somebody's going to get annoyed or steal the idea. So I really think it just comes down to being like personal, to like Tamika said before, like kind of almost having a schedule, if you will, for like what you're going to do with marketing, like allowing yourself the time to really figure out your plan of attack, not just diving in and hoping it works, you know? So.
Thank you.
Yeah, because for the next book, I'm much better prepared, because the last one was my first time. I really didn't know what I was doing, to be honest. I was just kind of winging it, and I learned a lot from that. So this time around, I used beta readers. This time I was doing different things to make you know.
Book talk too. Book talk.
Mm-hmm.
They got some goodies over there. Book talk.
Everyone talks about book talk. I'm not on TikTok, so
I honestly would have avoided it like the plague, but book talk has been like very helpful. Just in the sense of being able to like connect with people who are reading more so than like people who are more heavy into writing. You know what I mean? Like these are people who are just reading, they're just consuming the work, as opposed to like trying to network.
You know, I find that with the books of horror community on Facebook. I don't know if you guys are on there. I went to an event last year. It was at a library, and we were doing a reading and we're selling books. And one of the members of Books of Horror came up and talked to me. It was such a wonderful moment. And we took a picture together. We kind of like squealed a lot because I love Books of Horror. And so if you're not on there, I say check that out for sure. There are authors on there. Obviously, I'm on it, but
yeah, me too.
There's just a love, and it's just books. It's not film or television. It's just.
And you can't do promo, like self promo, really. Like it's like specified, you know. So like every time like I'm tagged in something, I'm like, oh my god, what's happening? You know, who read something? Help.
That's neat too.
Okay, well, I think we're winding down for tonight. Tamika, why don't you let the audience know where they can find you on social media?
TamikaThompson.com is, I think, the best place to go. It's got, you know, my newsletter, my blog, all of my social handles, links to the books if you want to check them out, and then reviews or essays that I've written as well. I've done a couple of horror reviews for Ginger Nuts of Horror, and one of them was the Dick Halloran essay that I was mentioning earlier, Dick Halloran from The Shining. So, TamikaThompson.com.
Check that out.
Lydia, where can we find you?
I am literally everywhere. Most places, if you look for Lydia Prime, I will come up. Google's probably the easiest, honestly, but Instagram, TikTok, Lydia Prime, everything, you know, Facebook, author Lydia Prime. I think LydiaPrime.com is probably still a thing, hasn't been updated in a while, but
sounds like my website.
And I'm at LeeRozelle.com. And also you can I have this starting this summer. I've been less on slasher, and I'm sad. It's like haven't been doing my little missives and things on slasher. But soon as I get over this writing kind of assignment, I'm going to be back. And I hang out and talk with a lot of people just via that. So I'm excited to get some of my goals done, and so my website and the Slasher app, that's usually where that's where my heart is. So
I'm on
you can find
Slasher
me there.
too.
You're on Slasher too, Lydia?
Oh, I didn't know that.
I'm on
Yeah.
Slasher. I'm going to find all of you guys on
Yes.
Slasher. I love it there.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
good.
didn't have my
I
login.
had
for
no
like
idea
a
you
couple
guys were
months
on
there.
there. I mean, that shows you how much that community's grown
Yeah.
over there. So I have to like start searching for you. It's sometimes hard to search when you just search by name. Sometimes it won't come up. You have to do the exact handle. But
Yeah.
my handle on there is Josh 1974 _ horror author. In case you're looking.
Mhm.
So
I think
You're
I
out and about
did
over there. I
that
see.
day.
You're posting a lot more than I am these days.
well,
you know.
yeah, I was gonna say, boy, is Lee sick? Not feeling well? I figured
Yeah.
you're probably busy writing. I normally I do
Yeah.
a couple posts a day normally.
When school's out, I mean,
Mhm.
you notice that my school schedule and my slasher schedule, like soon as school's out, I'm like dissertation mode. I'm jumping in. And it's like, and I've watched about a half a dozen movies and read some stuff that I wanted to talk to all the slashers out there. But I'm like, I got 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Either I'm going to work on this article or
Right.
this book chapter, or I'm going to do this. But I'll be back. I miss that, so I'm going to be back. I think Slasher's great.
Excellent. Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming on. It's great having a bunch of writers out there and telling your stories to everyone out there. So once again, thanks everyone for watching. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode. Good night.